McQuaid, where the music begins.
If I fall asleep, I could just my head will hit the mute, so it's all good.
I think
I just put some black ice out there.
When I'm mixing.
Okay, Matt, I assume you're going to go. Okay, we're go here. We're on. Hello and welcome to the most recent presentation in the Log McQuaid Learning Series. My name is Dave Dysart and I will be tonight's moderator. I'm the Director of Sales at YSL Pro. Tonight, we present a producer-engineer roundtable, and we are very lucky to have some of the best talent in the world, bar none. Our panelists are, in alphabetical order, David Bottrill, Richard Chycki, Karen Kosowski, and Eddie Kramer. We're going to start by having each panelist provide a brief bio, starting with David Bottrill. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, my name is David Bottrill. As you know, I'm a music producer and engineer. I'm from Dundas, Ontario, Canada. And in 1983, I walked into a recording studio called Grant Avenue Studios that was owned by Daniel Lanois and Bob Lanois, and asked for a job, and they said no. But they let me hang out enough until I made myself so annoying that they gave me a job. Right. And I started my career working at studios, at that studio, doing basically T-boy, toilet cleaning, runner for records such as Luba and Brian Eno's ambient series music, Harold Budd, Little Martha and the Muffins, things like that. And then when Dan went over to England to work with Peter Gabriel, he asked if I'd like to come along, and I said, of course, yes, and ended up staying in England for about 20 years and worked for Peter for 9 of those years. Lived in London for the rest, and did a number of records there, and spent some time in Los Angeles. I spent some time in New York, and then moved back to Canada, to my homeland. And this is now where I live, and I have my studio here in the background, where I do mixing work here and some individual recording, not so much amp stacks or drum kits, but I can do sort of modest individual recording, vocals and acoustic guitars and keyboards, things like that. And I do all of my mixing out of here. And then when I need to work with bands, I travel to where they are usually, because I'm one person and moving me is easier than moving a band. So that's my story so far, and hopefully I'll be continuing. And back to you, Dave. Thanks.
Thanks for that, David. Over to you, Richard.
Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Chycki. I'm a engineer and mixer and producer. I started off as a guitar player, very much like a lot of other people out there. I was writing songs and wanted to get a record deal, the proverbial record deal, and tour, and all of that, all of the lifestyle that goes with that. And I started to record strictly out of ignorance, for lack of a better word. I thought that's what you did as a musician. It's like, well, I have these ideas, I guess I have to learn how to record them. So I had started to collect up what's archaic, I guess, by today's standards, 4-track and, a small mixer, and started to do some reading, because my learning was very much pre education systems that are in place now. And, the first recordings that I had done are absolutely terrible, but they had taught me the process of finishing, getting a project finished. And it was something that playing music combined with with sonics and sound quality and how to achieve different things is something that had always stuck with me. And as I got older and started to record myself, record demos to try and get a record deal, they were circulating to record companies, and I was also recording bands. I was managing like a rehearsal space. I was recording bands that were in this rehearsal space, and they were sending stuff out. And record companies started to call and say, they weren't going to sign me at that point, but they said, by the way, who recorded this? And it was, well, I did. And they put, well, we have this band. And some of these bands, they were young and up and coming bands, like the Tragically Hip, they were this young band. They said, "Do you want to record a few tracks for these guys?" And so again, the circulation, very grassroots circulation, kept increasing, and I ended up starting to make a chunk of money recording while I was trying to get my band running. And there was a certain point where the financial aspect, I started to get really busy with recording, and I started to work with this artist in Canada named Jeff Healy. And Jeff Healy, remarkably talented, and we were doing a bunch of recording together. And of course, they were really enamored with the concept. They always had to use the larger producers of the day. They always wanted to use there was Tom Panunzio and Joe Hardy, and so I had exposure with these people. And then they invited me to work with a gentleman named Marty Fredrickson, who was this up and coming songwriter. And I had a great time working with Marty. And I had introduced him to this really weird thing that he didn't have much experience with, called Pro Tools. So he was amazed at what we could cut and splice, because we were recording with Jeff Healy. We were doing loops on 2-inch tape and pulling this loop tight and doing these 2-bar loops and doing all of these things in the analog world. Anyway, so we finished the record, and we end up, he phones me, I guess, about 8 months later, and he invites me down to Boston to work with him because he's doing a new Aerosmith record. And so I stayed on with him for 11 months, and we did a record called Just Push Play, sold, I don't know, I think 2 million records, and then did the Charlie's Angels soundtrack, I did another 3 million records. So that was kind of the dividing line in my career. And then since then, I've gone on to do Mick Jagger, Rush, Pink, and a bunch of other bands, and I hope to continue to do so. And back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Rich. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Karen Kasowski. I'm a producer and songwriter, and I'm based in Nashville. I mostly work out of my own private studio here, where I'm often collaborating both as a producer and as a writer, and sometimes as an instrumentalist. I engineer everything I do in my studio. I've worked in several genres, and I have a background in a lot of styles, including, pop, rock, classical, and country is what I do a lot of now. I'm originally from Winnipeg. I lived in Toronto for many years before coming to Nashville. For me, I feel like my path was actually similar to Rich, where I grew up, playing music and writing songs, and I thought, well, I guess I'm supposed to sing these songs, and I guess I'm supposed to, so do it myself kind of thing. And I had no money, so I was like, well, I'll just figure it out. So I started forming bands when I was in high school and pursued a solo project for a really long time in Canada. And I feel like it was actually, while it was a very slow path, I think it was beneficial for me because I learned how to wear a lot of hats, and I learned the holistic approach to, doing all sorts of aspects to projects, making records in basements and kitchens and spare bedrooms. And it wasn't until about 15 years ago when I started getting asked by other artists to write with them and produce for them that I realized that was what I loved to do. And it wasn't being an artist that was meant for me. And when that happened, and when I realized that, it was like the universe kind of opened up, and suddenly I felt like things were clicking, and I was way happier. And I feel like for me, I'm still really grateful for like the other path that I went through, because I got into digital recording almost right away. I had a 4-track, I did that for a while, recorded on 16 tracks and a bit on ADAT, but I got into, recording very early on early versions of Fruity Loops and Sonic Foundry Vegas and SoundForge before getting into becoming a really heavy Logic user, with Pro Tools as my second. And I'm really happy with what I'm doing now. Some of the Canadian artists I've worked with over the last few years are Brett Kissel, Tim Hicks, Washboard Union, Madeline Merlot, American artists like Ross Ellis, Mickey Guyton, Australian artists like Melanie Dyer. this past year has been weird, obviously, for everyone, but I feel like I'm really lucky because it's actually been the busiest year of my life. I just signed a publishing deal with Sony Music Publishing in Nashville. And of course, thank you. And of course, one of the artists I'm heavily involved with right now and over the past year or two is Guyton. And she's really been getting a lot of attention over the last year, including just like last weekend performing at the Grammys. So I'm currently producing more material for her full-length record now and other one-off singles she's doing. And I'm also stepping in as musical director for several of her high-profile TV appearances and things. So I got to actually be on the Grammys. So it's been quite a weird winding path, but I'm just overjoyed with getting to be in the music business and do what I love. So thanks for having me.
Very cool. You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, over to you, Eddie Kramer, please.
Hi, everybody. Eddie Kramer. I'm a record producer, engineer, or engineer producer. I'm never sure which way around it goes because I think, the job keeps changing. I feel like sometimes, I'm like one of those little things where the zeros and the ones keep switching over from producer engineer and the hats keep switching over. I grew up in South Africa, in Cape Town, born into a very musical family, studied classical music from the age of 4, all the way through high school, immigrated to England in 1960, with a passion for electronics and music. I got into the advertising agency business. Don't ask me why. I think my parents were very disappointed in the fact that I didn't really do too well at school and all the rest of that. And I think I was in an advertising agency for about a year, and I discovered that, wow, there's another world out there, and I want to get into it. I picked up the television yearbook. I was in this advertising agency, and I closed my eyes, and with a pen, I opened it up with it said recording studios. I went and wrote off letters. I got my first job at Advision Sound Studios in London, mono recording. T-boy, clean the toilets. David, you and I share that thing about being a T-boy. If you're not a T-boy, if you can't bring a tray of tea in and say, "Hello, mate, you want sugar in that?" You're not worth a dime, because being a T-boy is it. And you have to learn by just keeping your ears open and your mouth shut, because there was no schools in those days. And having great mentors, which I was very fortunate to have. After Advision, I went to Pi Studios, and I think there I had the most wonderful mentor, a guy named Bob Auger, to me one of the greatest engineers in the world. We used to go out on the road with a 3-track Ampex tape machine and 3 U47 mics. You go to Walthamstow Town Hall and record a 90-piece symphony orchestra, 3 mics, left, center, right, 30 feet up in the air. And conductor gets the balance, we turn a few knobs, here we go, and then bring the tape back, and we mix it. And then the next day we're recording the Kinks. So it was like, wow,
cool.
Always trying to get new stuff in the door, and great experience. From there to my own studio, I had a little demo studio, which did okay, bought out by Regent Sound, which is where the Stones did their first stuff. Built that studio, and from there I went to Olympic, and that's when the magic really started for me in '67. You may know some of the artists, Hendrix and the Stones, and a couple of Beatles things, and a bunch of other bands that you probably heard of. But there was another level of experience, and no pun intended, but the fact that we were able to record 80-piece orchestra with a big screen in the back. We did a lot of movie soundtracks. Above the control room was a 6-track mag synced up to the film. We would do all these lovely orchestral things. And then in the evening, well, those are during the day, and in the evening we had the Stones, or we had the Hendrix, or we had the Small Faces, or Traffic, or whoever. So it was a wonderful learning ground for me. And from there I came to the US in '68. Record plants, I was following Jimmy to continue working with him. And that was pretty amazing, coming from England, where it was 4-track, to America, where all of a sudden they had this gigantic 12-track 1-inch machine. I'm going, what? And Jimmy says, yeah, man, there's 8 more tracks for me to play guitar. I said, yeah, but I gotta mix it, you know. And it's like, okay. We did Electric Ladyland there, and that was great, and many other bands that I can't even remember at this point. But I wanted to expand my horizons, and I felt that I wasn't being sort of looked after from a financial point of view as much as I could have been. And all of a sudden, this opportunity came up, building Electric Lady Studios, which I did in '69 and into '70. I worked with Jimmy through that period. You know, he passed away, and then, of course, Electric Lady had to keep going. And I became an independent producer engineer in 1970. And then, you know, take it with all the Zeppelins and the hard rock bands through the 80s with the metal stuff. By the way, I recorded Triumph here in Toronto, which was a lot of fun. That was my first trip up to Toronto.
Was that Metalworks?
At Metalworks, yes. And always had this great feeling for Toronto. And, you know, I managed to get through the 90s. I'm still here. I'm still working. I work out of my house using audio movers and the Zoom that we're on. And life's great.
Very cool. Wow, what a career
You're an
you've built.
inspiration, Eddie.
What's that?
You're an inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
I think we've got a couple of questions here, maybe because we're a little ahead of schedule. Why don't we take a couple of questions? And the first one here, Jesse Cook, question for Eddie. What is a creative decision you made as a producer that you felt added to the record? What's a decision / idea that came to you that you are proud of?
Turn the amp up.
Make those tubes glow. I guess you play them as they come along.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the inspiration thing, I mean, I think, you know, when you get in a room with a band, yeah, what a concept. Human beings interacting. I love the fact that when you get 4 musicians in a room, or 5, or it doesn't matter how many, and they're all staring at each other, and you know there's some attitudes there. I hate you. I hate you. You think John Lennon and Paul McCartney got on? They were like this all the time. Jagger and Richard, the same shit. It just happens. From that, there comes a sort of a gradual moving of the song into one place, where I'm okay. Yes, okay. I got that. I know what the chord is. Shut up. Just play the damn solo. And something happens. Something magical happens. We've all been there, right? Mm-hmm. David, Richard, Karen, where the artist is just sort of, and there's this spark. It's edgy, but something beautiful comes out of it. That's what I live for, those moments where it's just magical. You're running the tape and it's like, bam, there it is. Come and have a listen.
Listen for the happy accident, and when you recognize it's there, utilize it. Thank you, Eddie. Question for Karen from Mark Alexander. I bought Out Here at Sea after your show at Say What a long time ago. Oh, wow. It sounded amazing. What were you doing back then to get that ethereal sound?
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Wow. Oh, that was around like 2005. And I don't know. I was just fumbling in the dark, I think. I mean, like I guess I was recording in Logic. I was doing a lot of stuff in the box, throwing a lot of schmoo on everything with plugins to try to give it more zhuzh and kind of try to go somewhere that painted the picture.
Otherwise, I heard that the Snare Buzz plugin is all over that record.
Yeah, that's actually so funny because I was going through some old songs for my publisher, and I ended up listening to some really old stuff, and I was like, wow, like, I mean, you listen to something you did a long time ago and it always sounds so different. Even stuff I did 6 months ago, I listened to it. You know how it is. It's like, I think we all have those moments where we're like, oh, okay, I would have done that differently. I would have done that differently. I think that record has a special place in my heart because there were some happy accidents that I just, loved, but I don't know if I could tell you, like, I don't know if there was like a specific thing. Shmoo on everything. Yes, that's the thing. I don't know, just chase something until it feels right to you. Like, that's still true today for me, 15 years later or whatever it is now. You just search for the thing that makes you feel something. And in that time with that record, that's really what I was chasing. I probably knew so much less about than I know now, that it was probably easier to just chase what felt right, because I didn't have all the other, thoughts in my mind about what technically I should do, or how is this going to work in the mix, or, I really wasn't thinking about any of that. So, I guess any happy accidents were pretty lucky.
Right on. Well, let's move on to our next topic. Let's start off by talking about how productions can continue given COVID restrictions. Now, luckily, we have high-speed and relatively stable internet connectivity, and remote recording / mixing and collaboration is a definite possibility. Given the lockdown status we are all facing, are you recording / songwriting / mixing remotely? If so, what are the tools being used? What software packages are you using? The consensus seems to be Zoom and Audio Movers, along with your favorite DAW. There's now some heavy-duty solutions in the marketplace, like Viva from Direct Out in Germany, for example. It's a collaboration with an Italian company that's incredible. There'll be some more information on our website about that. And are you actually working in real time as you're collaborating? So over to my panel to discuss what they do.
I'll pipe in for mixing.
Yep.
I haven't done any tracking remotely. So I really, the personal connection, which is, of course, can be very difficult right now, but I think the personal connection is really important. And, while I do suppose it's possible to achieve it, via broadcast means, I think it's more challenging than to be on site. So, but having said that, for me, I've been using Audio Movers now for a while, and I just have it connected to my 2Mix, and I'll just drop a note to the artist about that. Okay, I have all the components put together pretty well. When I've got the mix in some realm of listenability, I just go live with it, and we'll leave Zoom. A lot of times it's just I think a lot of times they just want to be able to listen. Mm-hmm. There's actually very little personal contact. They're just listening, and then once you get really toward the end, we might go back and forth and fine tune a mix. And that's kind of, for me, has been the extent of the remote, but that really hasn't changed a lot, because the amount of times that artists are coming into the studio has just generally been dropping, where it's just like, I'll get either, well, just send me a mix, post it. I've got a Dropbox. I just put a link, and they'll download it at the end of the day to check it out, give me some notes, and then I'll do a recall in the morning, and then it's done. So that's kind of the extent for me for remote.
Thank you.
I've been doing quite a lot of actually remote recording with people in different countries, for a couple of reasons, the pandemic obviously being one of them. But there was this project that I did early on in the pandemic from Finland, and they were in a studio in Helsinki, and they were kind of bubbling together there. And we set up with Audio Movers and Zoom, and the artist had his computer in the studio where he was singing. The engineer had his computer and the mix computer, and we logged on various sites so we could share screens. And it worked I was actually amazingly surprised how seamless it was. We did an entire album of vocals where I was producing the vocals remotely. And there was a point during the session where the artist who was out in the studio had a picture on his phone that he said, "Oh, hang on a minute." And he walked into the control room to show me the picture on his phone as if I were sitting in the control room, whereas I was 3,000, 4,000 kilometers away in Toronto from Helsinki. And it was that, the longer we did it, the more seamless it became. I would just boot up in the morning, they would boot up in the afternoon, we'd get ourselves together, start singing. And I could assess with good quality the performances. The tonality was, I couldn't really tell, but they had good quality signal chain in the vocals. And I knew that there was, it was going to be recorded well. And I was able to do that. They then sent me the tracks that we had talked about. I had taken my regular notes that I normally do. I did the vocal comp, sent it back, and everybody was more than happy with what was going on. There was another session where I was actually in Atlanta producing a record there. One of the artists his son got COVID, so we all kind of split up. Some people went into the studio. I stayed at my Airbnb, and remotely, just a few miles away, did a remote session, and it worked out just as seamless as if I were there. And then when we discovered that nobody was positive, we all had tests, we went back in the studio, and it was fine. It's not the greatest of situations because, like Eddie, I like to be in the room with people because you can often say something with just your eyes to somebody and they know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the next best thing, the way that technology has advanced now, where we can actually work remotely, it's better than not working at all, and it's better than refusing a session with a band that you really want to work with because you can't travel there. So
Sure.
The next best thing, doing things remotely, for me, it's worked out remarkably well, and I was shocked at how easy it was, and pleased at the same time.
Cool. Shall I assume that the session in Finland was death metal?
It was not actually.
Okay.
It was alt pop rock.
I couldn't resist.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. Swedish are the death metal ones.
Right. Okay.
The Finns are more Russian, you see.
I see.
They're a lot closer to the Baltic states. It's not so, yeah.
I just learned something.
I have exactly the same experience as you had, David. I find that working live, I did a band that was actually from Arizona. They had their own little setup in their rehearsal space in Arizona, but they decided to drive down to their manager's house, who had this huge mansion down, I think it was in Mississippi someplace anyway.
Of course the manager had a mansion.
I was just thinking that.
He happened to own the record company as well. But he happens to be a very...
Of course, no conflict of interest there. Sounds all good.
Yeah, it's all good. But the band comes out and they had their own Pro Tools, they had their own mic pre's, everything. They trailer the whole bloody lot down. We set up, the drums in this massive room, and I thought, wow, shades of recording Zeppelin at Mick Jagger's house, right? Bass in another room and the guitars in another room, and they had closed-circuit TV cameras everywhere, and it was absolutely delightful. I could zoom in with the camera and say, hey, move that mic, no, move it down. Thank you very much. Make sure it's out of phase. Basically supervise it from here, monitoring it the whole time. And then my partner, Jason, has a studio down in Toronto, and he and I were linked up on my computer, and we controlled their Pro Tools session from where we were. And it was seamless. I mean, occasionally, of course, you get the breakdown in the damn connection. But for the most part, it was really exciting. We did all the vocals as you did, guitar overdubs, cut the tracks. It was fantastic. And then, the band would go on the road and then come back, and then I would have some mixes done for them, send them a bunch of mixes, say, hey, you suck, get out of here. And that was it.
For me,
Karen, I'm very curious to hear your experiences.
yeah, a lot of remote stuff. I haven't really done much in person. The odd couple sessions with people where everyone was masked and there was a lot of distance in different rooms. But I've been doing a lot of remote recording with artists who are in different countries or across the country, like Guyton. She's been in LA this entire pandemic, and we did her a whole bunch of stuff for her EP, all her vocals. And in her case, it wasn't a matter of her going into a studio and me zooming in with them in the studio. This was actually a case of, okay, we're going to do a lot of writing and we're going to be collaborating a lot. We're going to do a lot of vocals. Some of these demo vocals we might want to keep. So it made sense for her to actually get her own little rig. I gave her a list of what to get. Mm-hmm. And, she got a laptop, she got Logic, she got a mic, she got an Apollo. And what we do is we log into Zoom and she shares her screen with me and gives me control over her laptop, and I engineer the whole thing as if I'm on. Sometimes I actually forget that I'm in Zoom and I start trying to do things on my screen as if it were my screen because it looks the same. But I'm basically recording her vocals. I'm controlling her whole vocal chain with the Apollo, with the console software. I'm watching to see her mic technique. I'm communicating with her over video on Zoom. I'm listening through audio movers. And we're recording directly into Dropbox. So the minute that we're done and we log off, I have all the files in a shared folder already ready to go that I can open up on my end and import into my full session.
That's cool.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
I hadn't thought of that.
Very cool.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and likewise, like every time we're going to do vocals on a song, I'll set up, I have a template now that has, audio movers and everything. It's all plugged in. I just drop the 2 mix in and I have all the things, all the channels set up the way we've fine-tuned it. And I literally just keep throwing new sessions into that shared Dropbox. So when we get on Zoom, I know it's already there on her end. So she can really, as an artist, she doesn't have to think about anything technical. She's in the comfort of her home. Yeah. She's in her bedroom. So she's relaxed, and it starts to, like, we've gotten so used to this that it starts to feel like you said, where it's just like an extended vocal booth, aside from the odd internet dropout and various things like that. But it's been a blessing to be able to keep making records with people that way. You know
what, we go on about these, like, okay, well, except for the breakdown of the system, how many times, Eddie, were you in a studio where the channel you were using for the vocal broke down, or the tape machine stopped working, or stuff always happens. Right. Things always break down. You're never going to get away from that. Now it's internet connections going down. Reboot, off you go again. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You don't have to call in, the IT department, or you used to have to call in maintenance to come in and fix the tape machine that was broken, right?
Mm-hmm. What kind of latency should you be dealing with?
Yeah, I have way less downtime than I used to working on tape machines and full-on consoles.
Yeah. What kind of latency would we be dealing with if you're doing a vocal session and you're uploading files in real time, you're syncing with Dropbox? What kind of latency if you're punching in and out of a vocal?
Well, there's no real-time element to that for me because I'm recording onto her system. So all the recording, everything's happening on her system, but it's saving to a folder that I can then open afterwards. Right. And it's all there, and we don't have to worry about her transferring something to me or whatever.
Gotcha.
But you're recording to an external hard drive connected to her system.
We're actually recording to her internal drive. She's got a brand new, Mac laptop, and it's for just a vocal or just a few vocals and playing back a 2 mix. It's all we need.
Right.
I think the amount is at 0.5 milliseconds. Is that what it is now with audio movers? I mean, they are in some cases you can get it down pretty damn low.
Sure.
Yeah, it's adjustable, right? So like depending on the internet, we play with it all the time to try to get the right.
Sometimes I want to hear the mix back in 24 bits, and then sometimes it gets a little wonky like that. You have to dumb it down to 16-bit, but for the most part, it's usable at that regard. And it's going to look, unless we get to the speed of light, it ain't going to happen in real time.
Right. That's not going to happen anytime soon, regardless of how fast people say the internet is. Well, that was very interesting. Any other points vis-a-vis working remotely that we might want to consider? I haven't seen any questions from people popping up in terms of remote.
I think as a matter of like dropping in, I don't actually, when I'm doing things remotely, and in fact, I've taken this over into the studio recording. The way I do a vocal, for example, is, and I'm doing this with most of the instruments that I record, is I'll have a recording track that always remains on input and is always my recording track. If I want to hear anything back, I drop that down to a playback track, essentially. And then if I need to drop in on something, we don't really need to drop in. It's just like start singing from here and we'll record it and then just edit it after the fact.
Absolutely.
You don't need to worry about the latency of dropping anything in. It's just, you're always in record.
Yeah.
And the artist is never, his vocal level or her vocal level in their headphones or their system, how they're recording, never changes.
And it's all non-destructive. It's all non-destructive recording.
It's all non-destructive anyway. So you're just dropping it down. You don't ever have to worry about latency for dropping something in. You just keep recording and then edit it later.
That's how I
used to have the knack of, dropping the tape machine in, punching in, but I guess that's for us old geezers, huh?
Speak for yourself.
I was, Eddie.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll take a couple of questions here now then, so the questions don't pile up. There's one question that came in from somebody named Touch 182, which is a hardware-related question. We're going to return to that one a bit later because we're going to go down close to going down that rabbit hole a bit later, although we're going to try our best not to. So here's a question from Charles Xavier Campbell. Since the introduction of streaming companies, now that they've taken control of audio levels, how do you compensate for that? Do you mix your levels quieter or louder than you would traditionally?
I'm not going to touch that one.
Yeah. I would think we would all probably collectively say that we're going to mix to the level that we're used to mixing at. Get the sonic balance as we like it, and then it's out of our hands, unfortunately, at that point.
Well, it's more of a mastering question, right?
It is sort of a mastering question, yes.
Some mastering engineers I've worked with automatically have provided, a hot master that for if we were doing CD, and then here's the one that you should send to DSPs. Yeah, I think it depends on if you can ask for that.
Yeah, I know that the mastering guys are now. Apple has some specific tools for Apple Music that the mastering guys need to take into account of, and therefore do. Okay, here's a completely non-related one. Here's one from Veldex. I'm producing and mixing my band's EP at home. My problem is I won't stop tweaking. I'm struggling to find a sweet spot between too raw and overproduced. Any advice when to stop? The British have a very unique saying, and I'm going to make a polite version here, of it's possible to disappear up your own posterior, which is potentially what's going on here, I think.
Well, my question back to him would be, do you want to write more songs? Because if you do, then at some point you have to finish the ones that you're working on.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I've found that the record is over when somebody takes the project away from the artist. I've worked with a number over the years that tend to overthink things. Peter Gabriel, who I adore, is one of the artists that will not let go until there's a deadline of some kind that is unavoidable. And that's usually a tour. It's like, well, you end up having to finish because you've got to go on tour. I think that you have to, there comes a point for me, I don't know if you guys are the same, but there comes a point for me in a project where all I'm doing is making it different. I'm not necessarily making it better or worse, I'm making it different. And if I work on something too long, and I get bored of what I'm hearing, I'll keep changing it just to make it different. And at some point you have to go, what we had before and what we were excited about before is probably a good thing. And let's just run with that and get on with our lives and write some new songs and work on those.
What was the Guns N' Roses album that took like 2 decades to finish?
Democracy.
That's the one, right? Sooner or later you got to say stop. Or the records company's got to say stop. Somebody's got to say stop. Okay. Question from Michael Stubbings. Are virtual instruments going to eventually completely replace real physical instruments?
No.
No.
Short answer.
In the world of 30-second or 20-second stings for advertisements and for sports channel whiz bang sound design, sure. that, you know, people will do that. But in the world of emotionally engaging music, you have to have emotionally engaging artists playing it.
Mm-hmm.
I would venture to offer that I think it also depends on the genre of music.
Yes.
Because there's some very compelling music that's being made completely in the box, but, you know, it doesn't work for everything.
Well, then I would say that the person that is controlling those things is actually the musician and artist that is doing that. Because we know that the best things that ever happen with technology is when you break it. Jimi Hendrix turned his Marshall guitar amp up way more than was ever designed to happen. Whether it was that, you know, his idea or it was Eddie's idea, doesn't matter. They broke the technology and created something new. And a lot of these young artists that are doing things with plugins and virtual instruments are breaking it and creating something new from it. So yeah, in that way, virtual instruments can replace certain things or take instruments to a different level. But ultimately, the individual person or artist or creator has to be the one that's doing that. So the instrument replacing, the virtual instrument replacing a real instrument is not really the point. The point is who's actually controlling that instrument. And if it's even if it's a fake piano on a thing, if you got a great player, it's still going to sound great because it's a great player.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Exactly.
Sure.
Good. Maybe I'm going to return to our script here now, and we'll come back to some questions later. Here's a question from Rich, or a comment from Rich. Let's discuss actually getting work in the field and how that's changed over the years. Probably a lot of students wanting to get production work post-education.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to, I'm going to do a back in my day thing. Like I was saying at the very beginning, the process of education was very much trying to find mentors, finding mentors and learning and being exposed to studio sessions and learning studio etiquette. And, you know, as a result, you know, you would start off by, say, getting, say, in my case, I started tracking some demos, and then all of a sudden, you know, they got to be, hey, you know what, that track we did is kind of good enough to keep. Let's keep it. And, you know, didn't mix it or anything, but, you know, there was that little piece where, you know, it was a positive experience for a band and for record company. Then we come back again and you have a repeat customer. And then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you start to get calls from other people, and then it goes to radio, something goes to radio, and, you know, it might fizzle down in the, you know, the lower end of the top 30. And, you know, say in my case, the first thing that I had done in Canada, I was busy doing some of this Jeff Healy stuff. And all of a sudden, you know, I had another artist back in the day, Kim Mitchell, said, hey, do you want to do a track with me? And it ended up sitting at like number 2 in Canada for 6 weeks on radio. You know, so really it used to be grassroots. And nowadays, with the demise of the formal studio environment, you know, a lot of people are working from home, and it really is about forging relationships. I've found the greatest gains I've had is by forging relationships with artists. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you know, going and discussing something with record companies or whatever. You know, there have been some opportunities that come, but ultimately for me, 100% of the long-term relationships that I have are because I forged them directly with the artist. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I don't think has changed, but I think for any young artist or any young producer, the best thing to do is to get out there and meet people. You have to network, you have to meet people, mm-hmm. Whether that involves making yourself more known with social media, but it really is about the relationship and about having the experience, giving the artist the experience, because, you know, we can sit down and, you know, we were just talking about virtual instruments that, you know, the time that any of us as engineers have put into, let's say, whatever, miking drum kits or, you know, selecting the room and, you know, doing something that is, you know, doing something that's really groundbreaking from an instrument point of view, that an engineer has done. now, we can sit down and say, oh, great. Well, we need the, we're going to go for the Get Good Drums kit, number 7, right? And we can all sit down and work with that kit, but it's the experience of, 1, what we do with the kit, and 2, what the experience the artist has. And I think that is something that, if the artist says, God, I had a great time working with Karen or with Eddie or with David, I had a great time. Let's call them up. Let's do the next record too.
Yeah.
And right. And that really, that's the important thing, is to be able to forge a good experience in relationships. And I don't think that's ever going to change.
No, I don't think so either. We're social creatures.
Yeah.
I've done a number of papers over the years. I was asked by the Toronto AES back in 2004 to do a presentation on job opportunities in the professional audio field. I'll touch upon a few points here. We'll keep it moderately brief. If you're going to work in audio post-production, doesn't matter what fancy workstation you use, master Pro Tools. It is the ubiquitous standard in that world. And if you walk in and you try to get a job and go, gee, I'm a monster on Cubase, big deal. It ain't going to do anything for you. As part of doing that particular article, I interviewed a number of people, from everybody from Gil Moore out at Metalworks through Audio Post guys and whatever. And a theme kept repeating. And here I'll run down a few points. Regardless of which avenue you follow, a few key attributes are critical. Enjoy what you do. This is not an industry to typically become wealthy in, so you need to enjoy it. Be on time and predictable. Present well. Have a positive attitude. Think like an entrepreneur. Don't steal software. Try uncool and bad for the karma. Have a willingness to learn from those who came before you. The 2 ears and 1 mouth ratio is always important. Always remember the client relationship issue and people skills. Practice good communication skills. Understand the technologies that interact with our little biz, video, networking, computers, etc. Learn from your contemporaries as well as the old masters. And every day consider how lucky you are to work in such a cool industry. I mean, that's all basic life stuff. That ties in with what Rich was saying in terms of presenting well and selling yourself well. And, under promise and over deliver, I think, is another comment.
Yes.
Anyway, over to, I talked long enough there. Anybody else got some thoughts on that?
Realize that in my personal case, the only thing I'm qualified for beyond this is flipping burgers or banging nails. So both of which one of which I like to do, the other of which I don't eat meat, so it's not my thing. But regardless, every time I get into a session where things are not going well or I'm getting upset about stuff, I try to remember that what the options are. And I know this is really hard for young people to kind of to understand in a way that because I've been doing this a long time and I understand how my life could have gone differently, I'm eternally grateful that I found a niche in being able to do what I do and be able to spend my life not living in a cubicle. And so I'm grateful every time, I have a shitty session, every time the artist throws his pint glass in the window, I keep thinking back and going, yeah, but what if? Right. What else could I be doing? I really enjoy it. And like Dave said, people skills are really huge in what we do. You really have to understand the artist's temperament, the artist's mentality, and be able to, it's not necessarily manipulate, but be able to work with people and collaborate with people in a way that you both get something out of it. Mm-hmm. It's, when I first started out back, in Hamilton, I shuddered to think of some of the things I said to artists, or shuddered to think of some of the approaches I took with people skills, not with engineering. Engineering, I learned how to do that fairly early on and got better or worse as the years went on and learned techniques. But the bulk of what I do is not learning which microphone to use in what situation. It's learning how to talk to an artist, to get them to feel like they're going to give the best performance ever. And part of that is creating a great sound for them, but the rest is creating a great environment, an emotional environment where they feel like they're going to be the best creator that's walked the earth. And you do that, you're going to get something great out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what a producer does, following on from what you just said, Dave, is that you're part father confessor, you're the chief rabbi and the pope in that regard.
Right.
You want to encourage the artist to feel very relaxed and comfortable in the atmosphere that you created for them, and then that they feel safe coming to you with, look, I just don't get this bit. And you let them go down a path which may not be the correct path initially. Maybe they go way off to the left and say, well, do that. Let's just see what happens. And then you have to gradually bring them back to the path where your brain has already thought of it hopefully a few steps ahead.
Right.
And this communicative process is such a delicate balance all the time. You're always dancing around trying to find the best way to get the performance out of the artist that has that emotional connection. And when it does, it just hits you in the chest. You go, oh, thank you. That's what we're looking for.
Artists, when they're in their creative, you guys know this as much as anybody, Karen, the people that you work with, artists, when they're in their most creative moments, are extremely vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And like Rich said, if you can be that person that they can go to and feel comfortable with, they're going to keep calling you back. And that also translates not only to the artists that we work with that create sort of commercial recorded music, but even in situations when you're working for a shitty ad agency and the doofus who's telling you what to do doesn't know shit. But if you can make him feel like he's part of the process, even if he's got the shittiest ideas ever, it's like, oh, okay, we'll try that. Well, how about this? Rather than just closing the door off to them, those people are going to call you back and be excited by your ideas and work with you, because you find that people often in their most insecure have the most bluster and try to seize control of the situation. Rather than, I think, blocking that or putting roadblocks in the way of somebody or just shutting them down or not listening to their opinion, listen to what they have to say. Yeah. They might not necessarily be the right thing. It might be the worst ever. Let the idea have its moment. The room usually knows what's a good idea or a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right? But don't humiliate people in the process. You'll get called back. You'll get those jobs.
Exactly.
Like your ego kind of has to be under control.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so, Eddie. Very much so. You've got to be the conduit for these people.
And my friend Michael Voyevoda did a bunch of records for the Bare Naked Ladies, and they lost a key member at one point, and they went to start a new record shortly thereafter. And I was talking to him. I said, "So how are the sessions going?" He says, "At the moment, I'm not an engineer. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm basically convincing these guys that they still can do it." And that's how the whole session started, and it kind of slowly got rolling, and sure enough, it turned out okay. But yeah, you had to take his engineer hat off and put his psychiatrist hat on. I'm sure you guys have all had situations similar to that before.
The job changes. I get hired as an engineer. I get hired as a mixer. I get hired as a producer. And if I'm engineering, my job is notably different than the producer's job. I've done the last Rush record I did. Nick Raskulinix is an engineer producer. We both kind of do the same job, but we were both the band wanted to work with both of us on the record, and we just applied common sense that he stayed out of the engineer's backyard, and I stayed out of the producer's backyard, more or less. Mm-hmm. So, understanding the chain of command to let him do the all the psychology and to deal with the band, and my job is to make sure everything is captured correctly, deal with any technical issues, and try to shield the band and the producer from those technical issues.
So you have to make sure that 42 microphones were phase accurate.
All of them.
Exactly.
It was easy. So, but the job does change, and that's something that that have to have the wherewithal to modify, and to go with the flow as it changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, in terms of the actual getting work when you're just getting out of school, I feel like there's no, I don't know, in my experience and from what I see with other people, there's just no fast track. Like, you have to be prepared to just work really hard, harder than you've ever imagined working for a really long time. Because there's, especially now, like, there's so many points of entry into this, and there's so many really talented people out there. The best thing you can do is, you know, find people who are the top people who are doing exactly the kind of thing you want to be doing, and study everything about what they did to get there, and how did they build that trust with artists, and how did they get their foot in the door. You know, for me, I feel like what's really worked to get me in the door with artists in a production sense has been the fact that I also am a songwriter. So I've had the ability, from a commitment, a very low commitment kind of place on the artist's side, for them to come into my studio and we collaborate and we have fun and we write something, and I'll make a demo and they'll record, and it's a chance for us to get our feet wet together, and they're not having to hire me out of the blue. And, you know, it's a way to get to know someone. And even then, it takes a long time to build that kind of trust that we're talking about. So you have to invest a lot of time and, you know, to get to that point.
The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
Make your own luck.
Yeah.
The easiest thing for when looking for an opportunity, and this doesn't necessarily apply to the entertainment industry, but it's a big piece. The easiest thing that anybody is going to say to somebody that's trying to look for an opportunity is no, because no is safe. No means that somebody doesn't have to take a chance. So I think that it's something to expect, that it's like, keep doing a great job. Understand that you will get a lot of no's, and that doesn't necessarily go into the quality of your work. That it takes time for somebody to, it takes that combination that somebody is going to take a chance. Whether you're a songwriter or anything else, you can write a really great song and people will say, no, I don't hear it. And, you know, you can have that very same song 10 years later sell 10 million records. Right. So it really doesn't, it's just because somebody doesn't get it at first doesn't mean that there's a problem with the skill set that you have. It's one of those things that, you know, our industry, because there's so many schools and everyone's connected with internet, that everything is super saturated. It's actually more difficult now to say, hey, listen, you know, I want to submit a song. And it's like, you know, I used to go to see some record company buddies, and, you know, they said, yeah, look, these are the CDs that came in this week. And now, you know, it's just like Dropbox is like, there's a gazillion songs that, you know, if they're working 24/7, they can't listen to them all. It is impossible, right? So it's one of those things that have to keep pounding through the saturation and just keep developing your skill set, keep developing people's skills, and keep networking. And sooner or later, something will pop.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, shall we move on to our next topic? This one's much more technical. This is also from Rich. From a mixing point of view, what we get from working on legacy recordings to mix versus what is the norm now. And you mentioned DI tracks, reamping, samples, etc. And what do we do recording when we are going to mix versus what comes in from third parties? I assume you probably do some different stems and things like that if you know that you're going to be doing the mix on something that you're tracking.
Okay, so Karen had mentioned that she does that she tracks the material that she works on, correct? So why don't we start? Can we start there, because that would be sort of the area of like what the standard would be, that you're engineering and mixing your own session.
Right.
Would that be possible?
Sure. So what do I do differently when I know I'm going to mix it, as opposed to if someone sends me something to mix, or if I'm handing it off to someone else to mix?
Yeah.
I don't know that I do that much differently, except that over time I've learned that when I'm going to hand something off to someone else to mix, that I need to print down as much of my treatments and things, that the character things, anything that I'm in love with, even EQs. I leave everything on that I think gives it that personality of what it had, because I work a lot in the box too. So I'm not always committing. Like I'm terrible for not committing early on, and I'll have tons of virtual instruments still up and everything. And then I'll start consolidating and printing down. But I've learned that, like, if I want 200 EQ'd out of the toms with a huge, deep, wide scoop, I better do that, or else, I can't expect someone to read my mind. Even if they hear it on the rough, they're not necessarily going to know exactly what I did to get that in that way. And I've had the odd time over the years, I've learned this from having mix engineers say, can you print your snare? Like with all the schmoo that you put on it, can you just print it that way and send it to me? Or can you print your toms just, because I used to think, well, they might want all the options. They might want every mic I did on the amp. They might, I kept thinking they're going to hear something better than what I did, or they're going to have a better way of doing it that I did. But what I've found is that it's just different. And sometimes you get really attached to a certain character of something in the rough, and everyone's been listening to it. The artist's been listening to it. The label's been listening to it. The management, the dog, the boyfriend, it's like, if it feels good, print it and then hand it off. That's probably the only difference. And then when I'm mixing, then it's just me doing my thing. So.
Rich, I remember you and I having a discussion once. I forget what the record was you were working on, but it was like, there was a whole bunch of orchestral tracks. And I remember you telling me you had a Pro Tools session that was about 300 tracks wide. Didn't really make a lot of rhyme or reason. So
three rigs for 577 tracks.
There you go. So what's the first thing you got to do? You got to go organize that in some coherence.
Well, drinking comes to mind.
Exactly.
Well, the funny thing is getting, speaking to what Karen had mentioned, that the idea of committing a tone, I think, is really important. That I personally like to have, I don't send out multi-mic guitars. If I'm tracking something, if there's, let's say, a stereo pair of guitars, there's two channels.
Right.
Two channels of guitar. So I don't have the, I think some of my miking things are online. So for guitars, I have this matrix of just stupidity, hugeness of so many different mics, only for the reason that, we just set up this matrix so we can sit with a guitar player and we can just hammer through different amps and get our tones and our different sounds together. But when I end up delivering, like I said, if we're doing a pair of guitars, say as a basic rhythm track, I send out two tracks, not all the mics individually, because I find that the tone will, first off, it'll frustrate the mixing engineer. And second off, the tone will invariably deviate off from where the artist intended it at the time. Now, having said that, when I get mixes coming in, what has changed is that I used to get just single pairs of tracks, say for guitars, and then it broke out to all the different mics and the room mics. And so, if you have three different parts, you just have this huge pile of guitar tracks, but even more recently now, it's just kind of there's the DI, the evil DI that's always there, which is great for editing. That's kind of what it started off as. But now, I will get something, I'll listen to it going, this, it's just a, like a basic guitar plugin. And they're like, oh no, we don't know what the sound is. So just reamp everything. I'll get a kick drum that's recorded with a SM57 because, well, you're not going to use the real kick. Just put a sample on it. But I'll literally get kick drums that are just tracked with a single 57 just for the transient. So this is these are things that I find are really radical changes in the last 5 years, where for me, I'll send out a single guitar track, and the DIs are in there as a function for editing. But they'll be out there. So if somebody really wants to reamp, they can, but that's not really the intention that I would have sent out. But that's the biggest change I found, is that as the virtual instrument gains more ground, I'm finding that the recordings are getting more complicated from a parts point of view, but in a lot of ways, it's the idea of, say, well, just just reamp this, do this, use all, whatever kits that you're going to use. And depending on the genre you're in, the window for the type of kit can be very, very tight now, where it's like, oh yes, well, this is the type of band we are. And you have to use a slate drum. You have to use slate snare drum number 2, or the mix is right.
Isn't it, sorry to interrupt, but Richard, isn't that a terribly sad commentary on the industry right now?
Yes.
What the hell happened where
it's interesting. It's not
you're a snare and okay, this is the sound I want.
Yeah.
Get this sound.
I agree.
And print it with the EQ and whatever else that we've all learned to do initially.
Sure.
You're also trying to do it afterwards, and you've got a million choices. Same with guitars.
Yes.
Either put a 57 421 or a 67, whatever it is. You put compression and EQ on. Bam! There's your sound. Thank you very much. The guitar player's happy.
100%.
He in the headphones and goes, "Yeah, that's my sound." Okay, can you put a little bit of reverb or delay or whatever, and all the rest of that? But to come to and to further to your point, I get mixes, stuff sent to me all the time, and can you mix this? Can you help me do that? And I'm looking at there's 8 mics all around this poor little amplifier, and okay, and a DI, like you just said. And what the DI is supposed to go to let me hear that sound that you said, this plug-in that we like. Okay, I'm listening to it. It sounds like a thin piece of tissue paper being wobbled around in my head. Anyway.
Well, wasn't a mix engineer known in the early days as a balance engineer?
Mix.
I guess my point is, being as a guitar player, if I'm in the studio working with an engineer and we come up with a sound that I like as my guitar sound, I would not be very happy if I got the first mix back from the mix engineer who had completely just flummoxed the guitar sound and made it sound nothing like what I originally intended. At that point, the mix engineer might as well come in and play the guitar part.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're right, Eddie. It is kind of a sad commentary.
it's crazy.
Having to replace everything. I mean,
I'm going to use that on the guitar, the new Flummox plugin.
there you go. Well, it's made by the same company as Snare Buzz.
That's right, Snare Buzz featuring Flummox.
That's Flummox channel 1 or channel 2, though. High gain Flummox.
High gain Flummox.
Oh, I got a flummox in my stomach. Oh,
That's right.
To your point, Eddie, too, I think a smarter man than me once said, decisions are your friends, which means if you find, as Karen said, if you find something that is integral to the song, that is inspiring to the musician that's played it, print it.
Mm-hmm.
I have never worked on an Eddie Kramer multi-track. I'm going to take a guess that if I were to get that into my hands and I would just put it up on an Eve and just put the faders sitting at -5, I'll bet you it is really close to being finished.
it's pretty damn close.
Any money, and I haven't heard it, but I could just, I'm just playing a guess that it would be really cool. You just turn it up and going, well, that's the record I've been listening to for X amount of years, right? I think that that's something that is I think that that's something that the development of music now with the way the instrumentation, the way we're recording, I think that that's going to be more of a cycle where, in order to envision what the artist is doing, that the tracking and the commitment has to become more compacted and more defined, and that our options are limited, that we make our decisions and push the some of the options out of the way, because the more people that get involved with more options, the artist's vision just goes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to just make an additional comment. In the last 9 months or so, I found things have shifted around quite a bit, and the artists that we've been presented with are slimming it down. I mean, I just did this one band last week, the one I was telling you about. The singer's in London, and we're here, and the background vocalist is in Switzerland or whatever. But it's acoustic guitar, vocal, and a little bit of light percussion just to keep the timing going. And then we overdubbed bass and another acoustic guitar or a slide or something. And that was basically it. Oh yeah, background vocals. But very simple. I found that the music is sort of, in some cases, got a little simpler, and people are trying to figure out, oh, it's the song that really matters and how I deliver that song.
You know, that's really uplifting to hear, because I'm finding that the technologies that are being developed nowadays, and I'm going to sound like an old curmudgeon here, but things like auto-tune and editing drums and virtual drum machines that can play, loops that are in good time. It's sadly what it has done, in my opinion, is that young musicians have not learned their craft. Like young engineers are recording kick drums with 57s, young musicians are not learning how to play and how to sing, because, well, you can just fix that with auto-tune, right? Or you can just edit that, that'll be fine. They're not learning how to get the feel into a performance, because they just know, oh, you're just going to take it and edit it anyway. And this is the saddest thing, because I grew up too in the early 80s and 90s, where when you played as a band track, the band had to play the damn song.
Yeah.
You might have edited some performances together on multi-track, but they still had to play the damn song. And nowadays, you get 2 or 3 takes from the drummer. It's like, oh, it's okay. You got the fill you want, great. We'll edit that. And part of that is also because of time constraints and budget constraints that are forcing us into this situation. But back in the day when they made Stax Records or they made records in Muscle Shoals and the Swampers got in there, they did 3 takes and you were done. And it sounded amazing. And nowadays, musicians, there's some, this is not all musicians, and I'm not sort of shitting on the whole thing, but it's these technologies that we're able to, we're designed so that we could save time, or that we could save a great performance that was maybe a little bit flat, are now becoming things that are crutches that we're leaning on, and musicians are leaning on too much. And
made them lazy, and the mental attitude and the focus of attention of learning a craft and getting it right and doing it until it is right, until you've got every ounce that you possibly can pull out of that song and get that damn performance. Hendrix was, sorry to use Hendrix as an example, but
not at all.
He would sometimes take weeks of jamming and messing around with a whole bunch of ideas, and then finally coming together and pulling all those ideas together and getting in the studio and cutting it, and then coming back and on another day and recutting it. He felt he could do it better. And then there's the opposite of that with Jimmy, where he would come into the studio and the song was pretty well damn formed. A couple of rehearsals with Mitch and Noel or whoever the band was at the time, and they would just nail it in 3 takes and thank you very much, good night, So what do you say, Karen Kasowski?
I find myself wondering as we talk about this, because I agree, like there's definitely a bit of musicianship has been lost. That said, I mean, in Nashville, there's also some pretty freaking amazing musicians here still. There's still a very alive studio musician scene here with amazing players. I wonder about a chicken and an egg situation with artists, especially where they're thrown into this machine, especially newer artists, and sometimes they're not given enough time to develop. But also there's this unrealistic, superhuman blockbuster movie standard of what an auto-tuned vocal sounds like now. And the general public has become so used to hearing it a certain way. Even labels, teams, they're all used to hearing a certain bar of edited, perfected, polished to the point of like I go back and listen to records I loved in the 90s. And I'm like listening to them going, wow, like it sounds so raw, so different. So, you know, and it's like, it's almost like it's a chicken and egg because it's so perfect that like no one can do that. Like, I'm thinking, especially like with some vocalists and stuff where it's like the vocals are just a certain way and it's not even human to sing that way. You know, I don't know.
I heard an interesting comment a few years ago from a friend of mine that still kind of cracks me up. And the comment is, nobody walks down the street humming a reverb preset.
Hey, back off with that.
But a delay, a cool delay throw. Maybe.
I've been Lex 480. Come on. A plate.
That's fun.
So, I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, it's very truthful. Nails the thing on the head. I'm going to pop up a quick question. We've had a problem with questions coming in on the chat thing. So I'm getting the odd one texted to me on my cell phone here. Okay, so here's one. Are you in the box on a console or hybrid?
I'm 100% in the box.
Yep. I can see your studio.
The thing about it for me, and I spent years on consoles and working on consoles, but we've got to the point, like Karen says, of the expectation of people now is like, well, I love that mix that you did, but I want the vocal a half a dB up in the verse, but
right.
Everything else exactly the same. To do that in an analog format is just impossible. It's never quite the same. There's always variation, which is cool creatively. But if somebody is expecting it to be exactly the same, except for the change they want, and they're not getting that, you're not getting the gig the next time.
Right.
So I'm in the box.
Yeah.
I'm sort of half in, half out. I would actually, no, I tell a lie. It's probably more 70% in the box now. Our system, we have a whole pile of outboard gear that we still, if the client wants the mix to be processed through Fairchilds and LA2As and I do use 1176s, and I got some lovely 500 series crazy ass things that you can't duplicate digitally. It's a thing called, have you ever heard of a Comet? It's a compressor. They made very few of them. I've got 3. I'm very lucky to have gotten 3 of these damn things.
No, I'll be looking at it.
It makes the bass sound like it takes a DI and gives it this and that. It's all of a sudden comes this big fat animal growling at you. I love it.
Wow.
Cool.
That's awesome. I'm in the box completely. So I stopped consoles. I was doing the transition back in around 2000. I was starting to mix, and I was mixing the record both on a console and then in Pro Tools at the same time. And once I couldn't tell the difference anymore,
You just made the change. Yeah.
I flipped the proverbial switch where I started to, I had my assistant cut mixes together, and I would listen, and it's like, is there a change there? I'm not sure. And when I got to that point, I went, is it 100% the same? At that time, it was 100% the same, but it would be no different than if I had done a recall, like on a 9000J, if I did a recall. It never came back exactly the same anyway, so it could be
Yeah.
But I'm speaking to what Dave was saying, the pace. Last analog record I mixed to the producer's wish that I mixed it on an analog console. Was in 2015, and we printed stems of everything for it to battle the recall issues, because we have stems and be able to take that vocal and turn it up. But I had 2 assistants. And the studio was running 24 hours a day. And I would finish a mix, and then I would leave. I would finish a mix in the morning. So by like 1 o'clock, that guy would work till about 11 o'clock at night printing stems. And then the other guy would work until the morning and then get the track set up, and I would come in and mix. And the amount that record cost the artist, just because of that, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I just don't think that the industry, with few exceptions, of course, but I don't think the industry can maintain that on a full scale.
Having said all of that, I do have to say that one of the most fun, enjoyable records that I mixed was a project I did with, the first time I did a project with Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins. So he had, you'll love this, guys. He had two 16-track, 2-inch Studers, which he liked to record guitars on, not drums and bass. He liked the guitars on tape. The drums and bass were in Pro Tools. We had 16 channels of Neve. We had an old EMI console, the old Beatles EMI console, a Trident A range, all blended into a Helios console where I blended the drums on the Neve or the EMI, depending on some of the guitars and stuff on the Trident, then into the Helios. Had to blend that all down into subgroups right in front of me. There was no automation at all. I had to do manual mixes, tape and lines, right? Editing on half-inch. And I would run through, and I said to Billy, I said, look, you know, if you want to recall to get something, it's not going to be exactly the same. He said, I don't care. He said, if I like the mix, I like the mix. If I don't like the mix for some reason, we'll just do it again. And I thought, what a great attitude.
Absolutely.
And I had so much fucking fun playing the mix. It was everyone was a performance, and it would come in and listen. You'd go like, yeah, that was great. A little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. Okay. And then I go do another one. And it'd be totally different, but really exciting. And it was the most fun I had mixing in 20 years.
That sounds great.
Now, well, I had a client who was accepting of the fact that things were going to be different, and it was fully analog, and that was okay. Right.
Also you had 4 of the greatest consoles, the Helios.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. It was a blast. But again, you couldn't do that for a label that wants, you know, we need a quarter dB vocal up in the verse. Like, that's just not going to happen. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Let me ask all of you guys who are in the box. If you had the opportunity to, you're in the box and you wanted to just put it through the Neve board or a pair of Helios at the line level or some kind of beautiful analog piece of gear and then print it back, would you do that just to get that sound?
I've done it with various things. I mean, I even have, like, I do that with instruments because I have, like, you know, a Juno 106 filter in a box to, like, print drums through sometimes and stuff. But I mean, I'm so much of a control freak over it that I wouldn't want to, I feel like for my personal style, I probably wouldn't want to do that with like a final mix or something because I might need to change it, you know, and if I don't have access to that on a regular basis, then, you know, it's the tweakability.
But if you had that in the studio, if you had like an Ampex half-inch tape machine and somebody said, hey, could you print it through that? Because when I print my mixes these days, I'll use the Burl A/D converter, but if I'm doing a Hendrix thing, I'll record. The master is done 3 ways. I do a digital print through, which I'm doing all the time, one on tape, and then I take the tape and play it back through the Burl back into Pro Tools. So I have 3 different mixes when I go to mastering, and I just pick the one that sounds the best.
Yeah.
And which one do you usually pick?
Depends on the material. If it's more hard rock, heavy metal, the digital will win out. If it's more sort of a mellower thing, tape. Tape through the Burl is fabulous because it has this wonderful depth to it.
Sure.
Absolutely. Here's a question vis-a-vis mastering. Do you have mastering engineers you work with, or do you do it yourself? Can you talk about mastering for streaming services? Now,
I can only just say that there's a handful of great mastering engineers in the world. Bernie Grumman is still, for me, one of the greatest. Just going in the studio with somebody like him and putting up your mix, whether it's digital or tape or whatever, and hearing what a mastering engineer who really has stuff together, it's like the heavens open up and all this beautiful sound. You thought you had a good mix, and you know, if you have a good mix, what he does or somebody like him does is just the whole thing opens up and you go, yeah. I can't do that, he can.
Well, I think another thing to consider about mastering, I had it described this way to me many years ago, is mastering is the final step of the creative stage and the first step of the manufacturing stage. I mean, if you're mastering for vinyl, you've got RAAA curves to take into account. You've got to, mono the bass so you don't get grooves that are like that wide on your record. I mean, you need people that have that expertise.
Unfortunately, in today's market, vinyl has overtaken CDs. I love that.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Which mastering engineers do you guys use? David, Karen, Richie?
So I used to use Bob Ludwig a lot. I always loved what he did. I was always very nervous taking in all of my masters to people like that, because I always felt like they've done so many amazing things that here I'm bringing in my little record, and please don't be too mean to me and everything. So it's but yeah, I use Joe Carvalho in Toronto a lot. I think he's actually quite good.
I love Joe. Joe is great.
He's a really talented young guy.
Very good.
Very accommodating, whatever you want, but he makes things, sound great. Joe Lambert, I've just been using recently in New York. He's really, really talented, young guy again, but makes things, all of a sudden, it just makes me sound better. It makes what I do sound better. And that's invaluable. It's not my area of expertise at all. I've done a couple things and just like, yeah, I can make it louder too, but
right.
Not an engineer. It's an art form, and I don't pretend to be.
It is absolutely an art form. I mean, just to have that independent ear, and this person that you're with, and there's some fantastic lady mastering engineers who I'd love to hear what they do for my records.
Emily Lazar, she's fantastic.
Yeah,
Emily Lazar is unbelievable.
Yeah. Who do you use, Karen?
I've been using Andrew Mendelsohn at Georgetown and Pete Lyman at Infrasonic.
Right. Very good.
And Adam Ian has been doing some cool stuff for me too. So, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I've used Bernie before. Bernie did the original, the Snakes and Arrows, Rush Snakes and Arrows mastering. So used him before, and used Andy Van Dett a lot.
Yeah, Andy. Yeah.
Andy's good.
Yeah, Andy's great.
So we're all in agreement that having a great mastering engineer finish your product is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
All the whole thing about, just put it in the box and give it some compression and all that.
There's more to it than that, we all know.
If nothing else, it's an independent set of ears. And
exactly.
I love getting feedback from these guys and say, look, where am I going wrong? What am I doing wrong here? What's wrong with my room? What's wrong?
Just quit, David. Just quit.
Back to banging nails.
So we got about another 35 minutes or so. I'm going to leap into some of the questions that had been submitted in written form over the last little while. Here's one for you, David. Hey, everyone. My name is Adam Prezio, solo rock artist known as Adversary. On top of Eddie and David having produced some of my all-time favorite artists like Kiss, Rush, and Tool, David also worked on another one of my favorite albums called Fables from a Mayfly by Fairden Midland. Just wondering if he has any particular memories during that production, such as if Darrow insisted on hanging from the ceiling during vocal takes. I guess you'd remember that, wouldn't you?
If he wanted to, the ceiling was quite low. I actually made that record in my basement. Built a studio in my house in Roncesvalles in Toronto.
Oh yeah, sure.
They drove up from Texas in their RV. They parked it. I got them a house out in the Danforth, and I had my studio, and they came to my studio every day.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff liked to play cards, so he was a guitar player in the band. He would drop the band off at home after the session at night, then drive to Fallsview, play blackjack all night, drive back in the morning, pick up the band, drop them off at my house, and fall asleep in the RV till it was time to do his overdubs.
Wow.
There you go.
The singer Darrow, or Andrew, I knew him as. He was. It was very interesting. He was going through a lot emotionally at the time, and in fact, during that session, his hair started falling out in clumps because he was so anxious about what he was doing. But we made a great record out of that. I think my poor family we were putting 5150s in the closet in the basement and cranking them until about 9 o'clock at night. So my poor 5-year-old stepdaughter wasn't getting much sleep. But yeah, it was a great record to make. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
Cool. Here's one from Nate Friedman for Eddie Kramer. Out of all the artists at Woodstock, who was the hardest to set up / engineer and why?
It was the whole damn show was that way. I mean,
it looked insane.
Okay, so very briefly, from the very first band that got on stage, there was this circular platform with wheels on it, divided in half. The first band on the front half, the other band, second band was behind. Yep. And the idea was, first band plays, turn the turntable, and we're ready to go. Literally, the moment that first band finished and they turned the turntable, all the bloody wheels fell off.
Oh, nice.
That kind of set the tone. I'm in a truck, which is about 250 yards behind the stage in a tractor trailer in one corner with two 8-track machines. One of them is in an orange crate with string and wire and things holding it together, with 12 channels, right, of inputs, 2 Shure mixers, 1 LA2A. That's it. And by the way, it's 8-track, but it wasn't 8 because you got pulse sync, pulse tone on track 8 for the film. 7 is the audience. You got 6 tracks of audio to play with, and that's it. So from the very first band onwards, not only did we lose communication with the stage, our headphone thing, we couldn't hear each other. So we would stand in the corner of the truck and wave and go,
Lord.
and it would say, it was chaotic, but it was fun. I mean, I would sometimes make that run from the truck, jump down, run to the stage. Okay, both these mics here, and they're all 58s.
Right.
There is no condensers, the whole thing. And it was just a miracle that we could actually get stuff done. I think the most difficult band, in answer to his question, probably was Sly Stone, which had a massive horn section over
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were up for 3 days and 3 nights. And the only way that we were able to stay up, they gave us vitamin B12 injections in the bum. And bloody hell did they hurt, mate.
Wow.
How many tracks did it take to record the Fish Cheer?
All 6.
What did you use the LA2A on?
Vocals, generally speaking, yeah.
Things have changed.
Slightly.
Just slightly.
Driving 250 yards back then was a mission.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Wind sprinting 250 yards. Having to jump over hippies as you're parting to the hippies. Okay, well, here's another one that for the panel. This one in particular was asked of Eddie, but I'm sure we can all have a bit of a kick at the can here. You've seen recording change from multi-track tape machines to syncing 2 machines together for more tracks to hardware recorders with almost unlimited tracks in a computer. Have all the changes made recording better?
Well, we've addressed that a few times today.
We have indeed.
But I mean, I think the answer is, in some cases, it can improve in the sense that, I can spread out the bass drum and, there's an inside mic, there's another inside mic, there's an outside mic. Okay, they're separate tracks. I get the blend as I'm doing it because I want to monitor that on one fader. Listen to me. But essentially, when I'm listening to those 3 mic inputs, I want to hear them individually first, get the sound I like, and monitor it as one source. So that's nice afterwards if I want to tweak, the attack on the inside mic and give it a nice big bump at 5K and roll off at 300 and all that kind of stuff. I can do that.
Right.
Has it improved? I don't know. It's verdict's out for me. It's just a matter of convenience. Pro Tools is here to stay.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you going to do? Do I hate Avid? You bet I do.
I think the quality of manufacturing of components, of technology that has made there's lots of people making great, affordable condenser microphones, valve microphones. There's lots of people that are making those things. So yeah, that kind of thing has improved recording for sure. The multitude of tracks, I don't know, it's given us more options.
But too many options.
Options are not always the best thing.
No.
So I wouldn't say that it's improved things. It's given people more things to think about. But ultimately, it still has to come down to the quality of the songwriting and the quality of the musicianship. And at that point, no amount, 520 tracks is not going to make you a better musician. It's not going to make your sound better when a good performance and a good initial tone is.
Yeah.
During some of the guest lectures I've done at schools, I'll have some interested students come up and say, so what was it like recording on a tape machine, say a 24 track, not a pair of them, but 24 track? And I basically said, well, look, you had to have your song down better. You didn't have 8 tracks to try 8 different guitar solos on, so you kind of had to come in more prepared. And I said, in some instances, you might have found, you're starting to run out of tracks. So you've got a channel that may have backing vocals during the choruses, nothing during the verse. And when you got to sneak that extra guitar part in, you got to get it in that track, which means the engineer better be able to punch in properly and punch out properly, or start fresh, folks. And I get these kids looking at me kind of slack-jawed and going, really? And I go, yeah, that's how it worked, Yeah. And it forces you to make your decisions beforehand in many cases, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. That's my take on it anyway.
I think what some of these things have done in the modern recording technologies that are available now is it's put them into the hands of creators. So that's a good thing. You get to experiment, you get to do things at home, write songs. Songs are written today by technology that could not have been written, or at least in the way, or produced in the way that they are now. Right? Couldn't have an album like a Billie Eilish record.
I was just going to say Billie Eilish. Yeah,
couldn't do that.
Remarkable for that to have been done in their bedroom or wherever it was. It's just the two of them with a small little laptop and a couple of mics, and it's her.
Yeah,
her performance is just so compelling, and the songs are incredible. So when I first heard Billie Eilish, I felt the same thing. What did you think, Karen? You love her too?
Oh yeah, I mean, but again, it's like they're super creative. Like both Phineas, Billy, like there's obviously like tools that are in great hands,
But it seemed very simplistic, didn't it? It seemed like it was created with minimal amount of interference from the, multiple tracks kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Wasn't the Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams? I think I seem to recall that was all kind of prosumer gear, like 8-track Fostex or something. Wasn't that one of the?
I believe so.
Earlier incarnations of like home studio recording, if I recall. I think
one of the differences technology-wise, is back in the days when somebody would do a demo for a record, it was a demo because it was recorded on lo-fi technology and wasn't considered capable of being a release, although Springsteen with Nebraska kind of proved that wrong. But now what we're finding, I think, for a lot of manufacturers, if you look at something like audio interfaces, you can have small, medium, big, bigger, biggest. The audio quality of the small one is not necessarily any different than the audio quality of the big one. You just got more goes-ins and goes-outs, which means people can work in a bedroom, and if they only need a couple of microphones or a microphone and a DI, and get good quality audio that is not going to limit the caliber of what the recording is. Just not as many, you're not going to take that into multi-track drums, obviously, but,
I mean, the only problem partly with that is that because there are a lot of, at least as in my mixing capacity, I would get sent a lot of things that were recorded by people in their bedrooms that weren't really good at recording things. So you would get a lot of substandard things, and people would send it to you to mix, expecting you to make it sound like the last record you just done in a recording studio. And that the expectation level of that, it was a problem.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, but providing tools for creators to make things, to make good quality tools to get good, solid quality recordings from somebody at a limited cost, that was a very good thing.
I can see that, yeah. Okay. Okay, I've got to crack wise here for a second. We got the classic question: what plugins do you use in your template for your favorite vocal chain? Any hardware favorites is what I added. I don't want to spend too much time on this question as we can disappear down a rabbit hole.
No boy.
I would rather touch upon what style of device, whether it be comp, EQ, etc., is used and what order they go in. My wise guy comment with that, where you'd start off with your source would be your larynx. You'd have good lyrics to sing. You'd have a mic that's plugged in. Recording level is set properly so that it doesn't clip, and you hit record. And as we all know, you don't want to be the engineer that says, that was a great warm-up take. I'll hit record for the next one. No. you record them all. Hard drive space is cheap, et cetera, et cetera. So, you just maybe a brief discussion as to what order one would put things. Obviously, microphone preamp, EQ compressor, what order would you put EQ compressor in? I don't want to get into a situation where you start comparing 50 different plugins and whatever, because quite frankly, that's a discussion that could just go in circles for ages and we're not going to get anywhere. But just some basic signal chain 101 might be useful for people that are listening in.
A lot of these things aren't really like artist dependent and singer dependent.
Sure.
What you're using. For me, the recording that I do at home, I've got a great old, very, very old M7 capsule valve microphone. It's not a 47, it's a pre-war old.
Oh, cool.
Used to call it the lollipop or the Hitler mic.
I know the one. Yeah.
Got that one, and it's great for pretty much any vocalist that I've worked with here. And I've gotten to the point now these days where I'm going to get a new mic pre from Julian. He's going to send me one of his when he gets around to finishing it off. But Julian. But I will plug it into my Apollo and use the Unison with the knee preamp on it. Stick a little 1176 across it and get it to tape, in a good, even quality, not overly compressed. Make sure the artist is excited by what they're hearing, and get it down as clean and as simple as possible, and not overcomplicate things.
Sure.
You got a good mic and a reasonably good input with a reasonably good A to D converter, you're going to get a good quality vocal sound, and the artist is not going to be sitting for hours while you try different plugins on them.
Right. And a headphone mix is neither too loud or too soft, so that they're not overly forcing their voice or singing too soft. That's, I think, is definitely something. Everybody else, any thoughts on this?
For tracking or for mixing?
Tracking.
For tracking? For tracking, mics, I find just generally, we could go through, if you go down to Blackbird, if you go down, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Oh, I know. I've been in that room.
McBride will sit down and say, here, why don't you try my Elam 251 number 13? I find it sounds a little bit brighter than number 19.
Oh, that's quite the mic locker they have, huh?
Yeah,
I was astounded.
Yeah, it's
4 mic lockers.
over the top.
4, okay, there you go. 4 mic lockers.
As far as his microphone selection, so but I think that for somebody that wants to using a quality mic, to what Dave was saying, quality mic, and for me, I use a Manly Force a lot of times, and I just end up running some slight compression and I print.
Right.
And a very stupidly simple path, because if there's anything I want to do, I want to be able to capture it and be able to just grab if there's any peaks.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I keep it as simple as possible, and anything I need to do, and I'll do at the mix stage. Or if I'm going to hand something off and I find that, the singer, there was some work that needed to be done to sort of stabilize the vocal, whether, you know, there's a mic management, you know, during the performance or anything like that, then, you know, I can address that after the fact. So, you know, I just go for a clean capture and do it. You know?
I must admit that if I had all my choices right here and now, I would say a 67, you can't beat it with a wooden stick. It is still, for me, one of the greatest overall microphones for vocals, guitar. I mean, it's to me, that's the one go-to. 47, if you're so lucky, a 49. I mean, all these various tube microphones have their different characteristics. Some vocalists, they have so much top end that you want to put an RCA 77 or something like that to, you know, soften that spittle.
Have them sing through the mask.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. I mean, there's some vocalists who I just bring in the control room and give them a 57 or a 58 and have at it and turn the monitors up. But generally speaking, I use an LA2A and a Pultec. I just got one of those beautiful mastering at the IMS8. I can't remember what it is, but it's a brand new Pultec it's stepped. And it's absolutely glorious. I mean, put that, just a little bit of top end and you're done. I mean, you know, you can't beat the sound of tubes before, you know, you hit digital.
Exactly. Very, very, very complimentary.
But I'm sorry, and one quick other thing. You don't have to go nuts with $20,000 microphones. I mean, you can use a KSM 44 or KSM 32 Shure for $600. And the microphone market there's so many choices out there, and there's some bloody good ones out there. Stam, this company Stam Audio down in Chile, they make a 47. Everybody's making a 47 copy for $1,000 or $1,500. So, what do you guys use?
You should make your own 67.
Give me a minute.
For me, the mic that's like killed all other mics for me in my studio, I put them all away, is the Townsend Sphere L22.
Very good
modeling mic, and it's amazing. And I shot it out against other modeling mics, hands down. I feel like it's so great. I would take it anywhere. I can go to a desert island and have an entire mic locker in my pocket, kind of thing. And I actually ended up getting a little tricky with singers with it, because the way it runs with my Apollo, you can have the plugin with the different mic models in your console. You don't have to commit to it at the time, so you can record just the raw signal. So what I started doing, especially when I have a new singer in, you know, they're in the booth and we're getting sounds, and I'll flip through some of the models. You know, I can have them on a 47, and then a second later they're on a C12, and they're singing, and we find the one that sounds great. Now I'll be like, this is mic A, this is mic B, this is mic C. Meanwhile, I'm recording all their raw vocal takes, and they're not really thinking about it. They're singing, they think they're just shooting out mics, but I'm collecting these amazing relaxed takes that they never would have done when they thought they were doing the real take, you know? So I found it useful in those kind of situations, but generally I also know which models I like the best for certain kind of vocalists, and I often do just commit now when I'm using it, and I don't even need EQ with it. I just record. I use an 1176 Blue Stripe, and that's it, and keep it pretty conservative. You know, I do all the treatment after too.
I see. The question that kind of ties in with that, vocal recording. Do you feel it's better for a vocalist to track while monitoring processing effects, i.e. not printing, or with little or no effects? Do you find you generally get a better pitch track dry, or does that fall into the artist preference category?
Whatever makes the artist sing their best. Every artist wants something different.
Right.
Yeah, I've worked with artists that like their vocal absolutely bone dry and really upfront in the mix, and I've also worked with an artist that, like, he is in the cavern of doom, swimming in echo and verb. And if you put him up front, he gets so freakishly self-conscious he can't sing. So, when he's, you know, like he'll be singing, and you know, you can hear enough of the resonance of the from the reverb, and it's just kind of like, well, that kind of, I guess that's where he gets his pitch from, because, you know, you have that length of time where all the notes are elongated so much. So I found that there's absolutely no rules. Just have to get to know the artist and what they like, and get to it really quickly.
So I'm just writing a quick note to our technical person here.
If you find something that's really a really interesting sound for them to sing to, sometimes that can really inspire them to come up with a really interesting performance that they might not. Like you do, Karen, with a different kind of, you fool them into thinking they're not really recording when they're recording. That's a great technique.
Oh,
Yeah.
So giving them some really weird, interesting sound for them to play off of, either a super long delay or weird kind of chorusing that's going on that makes them play around with the way that they're singing things. That's also, you know, fun to do. And if they find inspiration in that, then that's useful too.
Distortion's a big one then for that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you ever have the artist sing in the control room with you?
Yeah, all the time.
Any of us?
Standing right there.
Not that often for me. I mean, unless, actually, that's not true. Up until this past year, I've never had a vocal booth.
Oh,
So they were always in the control room with me, actually.
okay.
But now that I have a booth, no, they're in there.
Oh.
A lot of singers that I've worked with are so used to being in the control room while the album is being put together. Like they're in there all the time, and they don't want to go out of that environment. That is all of a sudden it's uncomfortable to throw them into a booth. You know, so I mean, I've worked with guys who'll just take an SM7 and like right up on the SM7, and you know, I just keep the monitors as low as I can, so that you know they can sing, and you know, with a mic like that,
SM7 is great for that.
Yeah,
It really is so directional.
yeah. And he tried. I mean, we put him in a booth with a 40 and with a 49, and his pitch was like, it was crazy. It was like, and this guy was deadly accurate. Bring him in a control room, and like even if you wanted to auto tune him, it was pointless. He was that accurate, and he would just like blow through all the lead vocals, all the background vocals in about 4 hours, and like one take, because he was just like so in his element. You know, he was a drummer that he was a drummer that sang better than all the singers had auditioned for the band. So he ended up just becoming the singer, and he had to be live, and he had to hold the mic, but he would just nail stuff. So you know, it's whatever they're with, right?
Yeah. I had that here. Paul Rodgers the same way, exactly that. He was great. Give him a 58 in the control and turn the monitors up. Done. 2 takes, out of here.
Right.
So the moral of this story is you got to make it as comfortable as possible for the artist to get the performance out of them. You know, take away as many roadblocks as possible. You know,
Jimi Hendrix used to absolutely didn't want to see anybody. I used to make this booth on the other side of the glass. It would go like this, C shape. You couldn't see him. He couldn't see us. All the lights would be down. He'd have a tiny little light in there for, you know, so you could see the lyrics. And we would start taking, and the vocal take would be bloody marvelous on the first take. And then he'd put his head around. I could just about see him around the side. Hey man, how was that? I said, it was great, Jimmy. It was great. Let me do another one. And he would keep doing that. And I would say, it was great. So come on, Jimmy, come and have a quick listen. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, give me some green on that, man. I need some green. And I knew what he meant, because
What did green mean?
Green, everything in sound had a color. Green was reverb. Red was kind of getting into distortion. Purple was like over the top distortion.
Cool.
Yeah.
that is cool.
Purple haze.
Yeah.
I like that. After I finish a mix and I want to get my invoice paid, I'll say, give me some green on that.
Give me some green, man. I want some of that green stuff. Yeah.
Here's a question. You work with a lot of famous people. Do you ever get nervous around them? Eddie, maybe they get nervous around such a famous person as you.
No, they don't. They think I'm a complete knucklehead. I mean, I'm just a bloody knob twiddler, you know. I mean, okay, I'll give you the true story. When we knew the Beatles were coming into Olympic, I did have a momentary heart attack, I think. I mean, you know, the bloody Beatles are coming in. What are you going to do? Oh, it's royalty. That's right. I mean, Hendrix, Stones, yeah, that's great. But the Beatles?
Yeah.
But we kind of knew about them because as the Stones were recording at Olympic, you know, John and Paul would come over and they would help sing background vocal parts. I mean, it was that kind of family type thing that was going on. So, yes, we were nervous, but we knew Olympic Studios in those days was an independent studio, not controlled by any record company like Philips had their own studios and EMI and Pi and all the other companies. The reason that Beatles came in was Abbey Road was booked. They couldn't even get into their own bloody studio. But they were familiar with Olympic, and when they came in, it was like, oh, here they come. Very nice. Hello, lads. How you doing? You know. And the one night we did Baby You're a Rich Man. We started at 7 o'clock at night, and by 7 in the morning, it was all tracked, overdubbed, and mixed. Done. Thank you very much. And they walked out the door with a 1/4-inch tape. The next time I recorded them was All You Need Is Love. And it's my session this time. I wasn't just part of the whole thing. And they come in and John plops himself down next to me and he says, well, we got to do this song for TV. Then it goes like this. And he picks up his acoustic guitar and he's sitting in the producer's chair and he goes, all you need is, and he starts strumming away. And the band sort of just walked behind him, walked down into the studio. Paul picks up a string bass. George Martin walks over to a harpsichord, you know, and it just sort of organically started happening. I thought, Christ, how the hell am I going to record this? So I took a patch and patched the talkback mic into the headphones, and he would still sat next to me the whole bloody lot. And oh well, do you want me to finish the story now? Okay, I will.
Yeah.
So it's 15 IPS. 4-track, 1/2-inch, right? And that's about a half an hour. We get to about take 27. There's a lot of false starts, and he would get to the end of All You Need Is Love, and he'd go 2, 3, 4. All you need is, and they would just never stop. It would just continue.
Through it.
Yeah, just keep rolling. Get to the end. All right, lads, come on, come and have a listen. John says, "Can you wind it back too from the end, please?" So we wind it back. 2 takes before the end. We play back, and we're looking at each other. That was very nice. Bye. And they took the tape and went to EMI and overdubbed all the rest of it.
Wow.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
Amazing.
Wow. I remember seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show. I was like 6. And I think like everybody else that watched it, I wanted to form a band.
Yep.
You know, that was definitely one of the moments. I got a question here from Patrick McGroarty. Let me just, as we're gonna wind things down in maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes.
5 for me.
5, okay, 5 it is. Question for, this is a good. We'll end on this one then. If you had the chance to start your career over, this is for everybody. What would you change, if anything, and why? That's a tough one, huh?
Oh, it's like super hindsight, right? So
Yeah.
you know, what would I change?
I've thought about it a lot. I feel like there would have been a time where I would say, I feel like I wish I had collaborated more early on, because I feel like I had to. I'm very self-taught in a lot of areas, and once I did start collaborating more with other people, I realized how much I could learn from other people, and how, you know, it just really helped to move things forward. But then I think about it and it's like, well, what's done is done. We all have our different paths. We all get there somehow. I don't know. I don't know if I would be exactly where I am right now today if that had been different. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. I don't know.
Well, your career is kind of going like a Saturn rocket.
That's awesome.
25 years later.
Right. Exactly.
That's a really odd question to answer, because all the conditions, I mean, the stuff that's happening now,
Yeah.
everything is completely different from when all of us collectively started. So I mean, I would love to think of, say, well, I would have, relocated to California, when I was 17, as opposed to, but I wouldn't have known what the opportunities would have been there anyways. So I think it's a tough thing to. I think anybody that can navigate the industry, I think that we've all collectively navigated it in different ways, and I think just being grateful to be able to recognize opportunities and be prepared for them, no matter what they are. Right. I think that's really the most important thing. And if I were to change stuff, it was for me to recognize opportunities sooner and act on them sooner. With more authority. So
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very wise. I think opportunities present themselves to you every day. It's being able to recognize them. You're absolutely right, Rich. I think if I had listened more and tried to learn better from people in my early career. Having said that, every decision I ever made has kind of led me here, and I quite like where I am. And so I don't know that I would really want to change much, because then I wouldn't be here. And it's not, for me, I never got into doing what I do for castles or riches. For me, it was, I fell in love with being part of the creative process, and finding a niche for myself in that took me a lot of, I made a lot of mistakes and got fired from gigs and did lots of wrong things, but all those were learning experiences. So I don't know that I would change my poor decisions from the past, because I learned from them and it led me here.
I feel the same way. There's lots of mistakes, and you don't learn unless you make the damn mistakes and then realize, oh shit, maybe I should not have done that. There are so many instances about that I'm digging into now. I'm writing a book in the process of that, and trying to find those places inside you which you've kind of suppressed. Oh, bloody hell, did I really say that? Oh, that was stupid. Or did I actually make that mistake? I wasn't thinking straight, or whatever it was. You regret it, but at the same time, I agree with you, David, that you need those experiences in order to build upon it and become a better person. I do regret one tiny little thing. My dad said to me, you should write more songs. And I said, well, I'm not. But I ended up writing a couple of songs. It was with Carly Simon. That was on her first record. But, I've never really concentrated on writing. So I've just been a producer engineer. And I regret, if I had to do a regret, it would be that, not having collaborated more. And
you and Karen can write a song together.
Aw, Karen, I do envy you that process that you go through. And I think that's very admirable. It's wonderful.
Well, anytime you want to write a song, Eddie Kramer, I am here.
Why, thank you, man.
I walked into the showroom at Studer on my first day back in 1984, and there was a $100,000 Studer tape machine there and a big mixing console sitting there. And my recording studio home in my apartment was a Fostex X15 4-track. And I just looked around and I thought, yeah, this is where I want to be. Great place, great time. Well, folks, that was wonderful. It was lots of fun. I want to thank my friends and panelists, David Bottrill, Richard Chycki, Karen Kasowski, Eddie Kramer, for taking the time to talk with us and share their wisdom. So good night, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
That was a lot of fun. See you later.